Okay, so when we usually sit down to talk about congressional hearings, we're bracing for something, let's be honest, a little dry.
Yeah, very dry. You're expecting a lot of procedure, some polite
Right,
arguments,
some grandstanding for the cameras, sure, but mostly just bureaucracy, the kind of thing you might have on in the background. But what happened yesterday, that was Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. That was not that.
not even remotely. I mean, if
Huh?
you tuned into the House Judiciary Committee hearing thinking it was standard oversight, you probably thought you'd click on the wrong channel. It was more like a boxing match.
A brawl, a total brawl where the ref just went home. We're talking about U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi testifying about how the DOJ handled the Jeffrey Epstein files.
And looking at all the reports, BBC, Axios, the live transcripts, the one word that just keeps popping up is nuclear.
It really does. And so our goal today is to try and cut through all that noise because, when you have the Attorney General of the United States calling a congressman a washed-up loser.
And a lawmaker just storms out of the room.
Exactly. It's so easy to get distracted by the spectacle. It feels like reality TV. But underneath all of that, beneath the theatrics, there are some incredibly serious issues here. We're talking about justice, about transparency, and most importantly, about the victims of sex trafficking.
That's right. So let's try to unpack it. We've got sources covering all the exchanges. Bondi versus the Democrats, Bondi versus, surprisingly, some Republicans.
And we also have testimony from FBI Director Kash Patel. But I think we have to start with the people who were actually in that room, sitting right behind the Attorney General.
The survivors.
The survivors.
Yeah.
The Epstein survivors. This wasn't some, abstract debate about legal files. The actual human beings at the center of this were sitting there watching it all go down.
And that presence, I mean, it just set the stakes so high right from the beginning. The core issue, which Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal brought up immediately, was about how the DOJ released these Epstein files.
The ones everyone has been waiting for.
Right. Millions of documents.
Right.
But the way they were released, well, that's where the first explosion happened.
And the specific accusation from Jayapal is, it's just really disturbing. She pointed out that while the DOJ was busy redacting names, blacking out text, they somehow failed to redact nude images of the survivors.
That is the allegation. And it's an incredibly heavy one. Jayapal made the point that some of these survivors have kept their identities secret for decades. They're Jane Does in court, just trying to have some privacy.
And now, because of what the DOJ is calling a technical error, these deeply violating photos are just out there.
And to really show how bad this was, Jayapal did something very visual. She asked the survivors in the room to stand up if they hadn't been able to get a meeting with the Department of Justice.
Just to see who had been ignored.
And that's the moment that shit had just sucked all the air out of the room. Every single one of them stood up.
Wow. That's, what a powerful image. You have the head of the entire Justice Department sitting there, and right behind her is this wall of survivors basically saying, you won't even talk to us.
So how does Bondi respond to that? To the victims standing there saying they're being exposed and ignored?
What can you even say?
Well, she tried to thread a very, very difficult needle. She started with empathy. She called Epstein a monster. She said she was sorry for the abuse they went through. She tried to show she gets it.
But there's a but coming.
There's a big but. Because when Jayapal pushed her for a specific apology, not for Epstein's crimes, but for the DOJ's mismanagement of the files, the bad redactions, the whole tone just flipped.
Flipped how?
It went from sympathetic to full-on combative. Bondi just went on the attack. She called Jayapal's questions theatrics.
Theatrics.
And then she said, and this is a direct quote, "I'm not going to get in the gutter with this woman."
She called questions about protecting victims' privacy the gutter, while the victims were standing right there.
She did. And that one phrase really set the temperature for the entire rest of the hearing.
So what was her defense legally?
Her defense is that the DOJ is working under a really tight legislative deadline. She argued they're doing their best, but the sheer volume of documents is overwhelming. She claimed that any release of nude images was inadvertent and that they redact them as soon as they're found.
Inadvertent has to be a really tough word to hear if you're one of the people in those photos. A mistake, sure, but the damage is done once it hits the internet.
It's there forever. And the survivors, they didn't seem to be buying the oops excuse. One survivor who was there, Marina Lacerda, she was quoted after the hearing.
What did she say?
She was furious. She said Bondi has ignored their calls, their emails, and she said she felt the DOJ was trying to intimidate them into staying quiet.
So you have this total disconnect. The DOJ is saying it was a mistake, we're working hard, and the victims are saying you're exposing us and trying to scare us.
Exactly. And, normally in a hearing like this, the battle lines are really clear. Democrats attack the Republican AG, Republicans defend her.
The usual playbook.
But that is where this got so interesting, because the anger wasn't just coming from one side of the aisle.
Right. This is Representative Thomas Massie. I saw this in the reports and had to double-check his party. He's a Republican.
He is a libertarian-leaning one,
Yeah.
but absolutely a Republican. And he did not hold back at all.
And his argument is kind of the opposite of Jayapal's, right?
It's the exact flip side. While the Democrats are mad that victims' photos were released under redaction, Massie is furious that the names of powerful people are being hidden.
So he's worried about over-redaction.
Exactly. He's accusing the DOJ of using redactions as a shield for people who are not victims. He thinks they're using this victim protection idea to black out the names of powerful men who are connected to Epstein. He actually told Bondi he thinks this is bigger than Watergate.
Whoa, bigger than Watergate. I mean, that's a massive accusation. That's implying a conspiracy to obstruct justice. Did he have an example?
He did. He zeroed in on the billionaire Les Wexner. Apparently, in the first documents the DOJ released, Wexner's name was completely blacked out. Redacted. But then, after lawmakers saw the unredacted files privately, the DOJ had to go back and unredact it. So Matthew's question was simple. Why did you hide his name in the first place?
That's a fair question. He's a known associate, not a victim. So why the black marker?
Right. And Massey's point wasn't even about whether Wexner is guilty. Wexner has always said Epstein stole from him. The point was about the process. Why is the DOJ protecting his name?
How did Bondi answer that one?
She called his line of questioning a political joke.
A political joke to a Republican.
To a member of her own party, yes. And that's when FBI Director Kash Patel, who was also at the table, he jumped in. He said there was no evidence Epstein trafficked women to Wexner.
Okay, which lines up with what Wexner's team says, but that's not Massey's point.
It's not. His point is about transparency. It doesn't matter if there's evidence of a crime or not. If his name is in the files, why hide it?
And that interaction, it sounds like it didn't stay on topic for long.
It devolved so fast. It went from a debate about redaction policy to just personal insults.
What do you mean?
When Massey wouldn't let it go, Bondi just pivoted to attacking him personally. She accused him of having Trump derangement syndrome. She called him a failed politician.
Wait, she called a sitting congressman a failed politician right to his face in a hearing.
She did. And then she pulled out something completely unrelated. She called him a hypocrite for a vote he cast against a ban on deepfake AI porn.
Wow, so she's trying to paint him as someone who doesn't care about protecting women to undermine his questions about Epstein.
It's a classic tactic, right?
Yeah.
If the policy question is too high, why did you hide this name? You just pivot and attack the questioner's character.
It just shows the whole thing wasn't about policy anymore. It was just combat. And speaking of visuals and combat, we have to talk about what showed up on the screen.
Right. Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu. He decided talking wasn't enough. He put a photo up on the hearing room screens for everyone to see.
And this wasn't like a chart of the national debt.
No, this was a photo from the Epstein files. It showed Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor Prince Andrew, on all fours, hovering over a woman.
That's an incredibly graphic thing to show in a congressional hearing. I mean, that's going out live on C-SPAN.
It is, and we should be clear about the context. The sources say it's unclear when or where it was taken, and the photo itself doesn't legally prove a crime. But Lieu's point was much simpler and much louder. He just wanted to know, why hasn't this guy been prosecuted?
Why is he still walking free?
Basically. And Bondi's response to this was, again, classic deflection. She didn't defend the decision. She just asked Lieu why he didn't ask the previous Attorney General, Merrick Garland.
The old, not my problem, ask the last guy defense.
And usually the Democrat would defend the last guy, but this was maybe the weirdest moment of the day. Lieu actually agreed with her. He said, I agree with you. Garland dropped the ball.
Wow. So they both agreed the last administration failed and Bondi just accepted it.
She did. It might have been the only moment of consensus in the whole 4-hour hearing. They both agreed the last guy messed up.
But they can't agree on what to do now.
Not at all. And that moment of calm did not last. Because we have to talk about the real meltdown. The sources call the whole thing nuclear, but there were a few exchanges that were just beyond anything normal.
The exchange with Jamie Raskin?
That was one of them. Raskin is the ranking member on the committee, a constitutional law professor, usually very composed. But he accused Bondi of keeping a burn book for opposition research.
A burn book, like from the movie Mean Girls.
That was the implication. And Bondi,
A
she did not take it well. She just started shouting. She called him a washed-up loser lawyer.
loser lawyer to the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee.
And then she added, "You're not even a lawyer."
I mean, he is, right?
He is. But logic wasn't really part of the conversation at that point. It was just personal. But even that was nothing compared to what happened with Representative Becca Bellant.
This is the walkout. This is the moment that's all over the news.
This was the absolute climax. Bellant was asking about the appointment of Howard Lutnick as Commerce Secretary, citing his alleged ties to Epstein. A pretty standard question.
So what happened?
Bondi just deflected. She brought up a slain Border Patrol agent.
What does that have to do with anything?
Bellant didn't see the connection either. She called it pathetic. And that's when Bondi attacked. She pivoted, just like with Massey. She brought up Bellant's vote on an anti-Semitism resolution.
Why? Just to hurt her?
It seems like it. But Representative Bellant is the granddaughter of a Holocaust victim. And when Bondi made that accusation, Bellant she lost it. She yelled something like, "Are you serious?"
And then she was gone.
She stormed right out of the room. The hearing just completely broke. It wasn't about Epstein or the law anymore. It was about personal history, deep insults, and just pure rage.
It sounds like the actual point of the hearing oversight was just completely gone, buried. But they did talk about other things besides Epstein, right?
They did, briefly,
Yeah.
and shows the broader tension. They touched on a really serious incident in Minneapolis, where federal immigration agents shot and killed 2 people.
And Representative Steve Cohen didn't mince words about that.
Not at all. He called them executions. He was demanding to know why the DOJ wasn't investigating its own agents more aggressively.
And Bondi's defense was to blame local politicians.
It was. She claimed the agents were incited by Minnesota officials who had declared themselves at war with the federal government. Her argument was basically, you created this hostile environment, don't blame us for the violence.
That's a really stark us versus them position.
It is. And committee chairman Jim Jordan jumped in to praise her for being tough on immigration. So in the same room, you have one side calling it executions and the other side calling it brave agents in a war zone. It's 2 different realities.
Which brings us back to the big picture here. Let's just zoom out. We've talked about the insults, the pictures, the walkouts. What's the takeaway? If you're just a person trying to figure out the state of justice in 2026, what does this tell you?
I think it tells you that the whole mechanism of oversight is it's jamming up. This was supposed to be about accountability. It was about answering really painful questions. Why were nude photos of victims released? Why was a billionaire's name hidden?
And instead of answers, we got washed up loser.
Exactly. When getting a viral clip for social media is more valuable than getting an answer for a victim, the system just breaks down. It's a total failure of communication.
And all the while, the survivors are just sitting there watching this.
That's the real tragedy. For you listening, this isn't just political entertainment. It has a real cost. The anger completely buried the legislative intent. We still don't know how the redaction process is going to be fixed.
We just got a lot of noise.
A lot of noise. And what's so frustrating is that the grievances are real on both sides. Democrats are right to be furious about the privacy breaches, and Republicans like Massey are right to be suspicious of redactions that protect the powerful. But they couldn't get past the insults to solve anything.
It really makes you wonder, if this is the new normal, how does anything ever get fixed? Who is actually minding the store?
That is the question, isn't it? And looking at what happened yesterday, I don't think anyone has a good answer.
Well, we've covered the explosion that was the Bondi hearing, from the survivors' powerful stand to the bizarre fights over burn books. It is a lot to take in.
It is. But hopefully, by stripping away some of the theatrics, we've shown what's really at stake here. The mishandling of these files and the complete lack of answers for the people who were hurt the most.
Absolutely. So we want to leave you with one final thought. We talked about the shouting and the name-calling. It made for great TV. It dominated the news. But here's the question. When the oversight of justice becomes nothing more than a spectacle of personal grievances, who is actually looking out for the victims who stood in that room, waiting for answers that never came?
That's the question that really matters.
Thanks for listening.